Hello everyone and welcome back to Chitty Chats. Obviously this time around it has been a couple of weeks since the last episode, and the reason for that is Chitty Chats will now be fortnightly due to the fact that there's so much that I'm doing at the moment and juggling everything can be quite a challenge. So I decided that I don't want to give anything up that I love, and Chitty Chats is definitely one of those things, but I'm just sort of reshifting the frequency of Chitty Chats in order to synchronize with other things that I am doing, other projects that I am getting on with in my personal life. So you still do have the pleasure of having Chitty Chats to listen to. It just will be fortnightly as opposed to weekly. So last episode, of course, was on the 5 love languages, which I hope that you guys found useful, informative, and quite interesting. I certainly did, going through all of the research to do with that particular topic. It did help me understand some elements of my past relationships, a little bit about myself and what makes me tick, and of those around me too. So I think it's quite an interesting one and certainly very useful. Going forward then, on today's episode, I will be discussing the 4 attachment styles, and I'll give you an overview, of course, of what an attachment style is. Psychologists who have researched this particular topic, and again just dive into the importance of understanding your attachment style and of those around you too. So I will just begin by exploring what attachment theory is. Now, attachment theory describes the nature of emotional attachment between human beings, and attachment theory was adopted in the 1950s by researchers Bowlby and Ainsworth, who discovered that actually the nature in which we as infants get our needs met by our caregivers significantly contributes to the way that our attachment strategy is throughout our lives. Doesn't necessarily explain everything, but definitely explains a lot about the relationships that we have, the relationships that have broken down or that have succeeded, why that we're attracted to those that we are, and also the nature of the problems which tend to be repeated throughout our lives. So each of us does have an attachment style. It could be secure, it could be anxious, it could be avoidant, or it could be anxious-avoidant. So those are the 4 different types of attachment styles. But just because you are dominant in one of those types doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't portray other elements of different attachment styles in addition. But each of us does have a dominant one which overshadows the others, basically. So to begin with, the secure type of attachment style is somebody that evokes a comfort in displaying interest and affection towards other human beings. They're comfortable being independent, but they're also comfortable being alone. They have little or no issues sort of trusting those that they're close to, and in addition they are trustworthy themselves. They're capable of accepting rejection and moving forward despite the pain that rejection causes. Then you've got the anxious type of attachment style. That's the nervous and stressed person who is always quite nervous and stressed about their relationship. They need constant reassurance, constant affection, and they have trouble being alone. They have trouble being single. They succumb to abusive and unhealthy relationships for fear of being alone, for fear of being rejected and single. They also have trouble with trusting people, even those that they're very close to, and they are often quite irrational and sporadic in their behaviour and very emotional too. So this anxious person, as an example, would be, for example, the girl that calls her boyfriend about 36 times in one night, wondering why he hasn't phoned back, or the guy that follows a girl to work just to make sure that she's not flirting with other guys. So the third type of attachment style is the avoidant type. So this particular person is extremely independent, they're self-directed, and they're uncomfortable with intimacy. Essentially, they're commitment phobes, and they're absolute experts at rationalising their way out of any type of intimate situation. They often complain about feeling suffocated when faced with a new relationship that begins to develop greater intimacy, and they actually construct their lives in such a way that they avoid commitment, they avoid that intimate connection. An example of this is a guy, for example, who works 80 odd hours a week, and then he gets annoyed when the woman he dates wants to see him more than once in a week or on a weekend. Or the girl who dates dozens of guys over the course of many years and always tells them she wants nothing serious and inevitably ditches them when she's bored. And actually, in this particular setting, it's usually guys who are more likely to be avoidant types than women. So then you've got the anxious avoidant attachment style. That's the best of both worlds. I mean, not the best really. Of course, to be anxious and to be avoidant at the same time is double trouble, because not only is this individual afraid of intimacy and commitment, but they also distrust and lash out emotionally on those who try to get close to them. So anxious avoidants mostly spend time alone and miserable, or they spend time in an abusive and dysfunctional relationship. Although there is only a small proportion of anxious avoidance within the population, there is, as research suggests, a direct correlation between anxious avoidance and sufferers of things such as depression and substance abuse, etc. Of course, the formation of our attachment style develops over the course of our lives. Now, there are a number of factors that affect our attachment style, namely, of course, it is our upbringing, how we are brought up by our caregivers. In addition, it's how we form peer groups, friendships later on, how those experiences shape our attachment styles, as well as the formation of intimate relationships. You could be in a relationship with a secure person as a person who is more of an anxious type, and after a course of time, after a course of being with that individual for X amount of years, you could then become a secure type because of your experience with that individual. In addition to these very key factors that influence our attachment styles, psychologists Bartholomew and Horowitz hypothesized a model which shows one's attachment strategy and how it corresponds to a degree of positive or negative self-image of ourselves and of others. As an example, a secure type individual would exhibit positive perceptions of themselves and of others, whereas more anxious types would exhibit a negative self-image. However, a positive self-image of those around them, thus why they elicit this needy behaviour. So just to finish up there, guys, I would like to thank you all once again for tuning in. You guys are amazing. And just to mention, the references from this particular podcast were taken from markmanson.net, and I would definitely recommend visiting the website, especially if this is something of interest to you. There is a quiz on there whereby you can discover your own attachment style. Sometimes we can be a little naive to our own habits or characteristics. So going through the quiz and answering the questions and realizing what our attachment styles are can be quite an eye-opener. And again, this is all about empowering each other in order for us to be the best versions of ourselves. Thanks once again, and please stay tuned for the next episode of Chitty Chats.